Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NacheSnow.com. Welcome. Okay, so today's guest is Toni Lipsey, and she has a crochet business, and she is absolutely amazing. So regardless if you have a crochet business, a knitting business, or anything kind of in that yarn world, you are still going to learn so much from Toni and also really be inspired by her story. So of course, the show notes for this page is over at nachesnow.com/113. Can you believe we're on 113 episodes? Crazy pants. All right, so before I just jump into this episode, I just want to thank you guys for two things. One, thank you for leaving me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and also for those of you guys who also left really nice reviews. I really appreciate it. Also, I want to just thank you guys for all your messages, either on my post or DM or email in regards to episode 112, where I just talk about my, recent divorce and having a hysterectomy last year and actually moving right at the beginning of COVID. It was crazy, just a crazy time. But it was very heartwarming to hear that a lot of you guys have gone through similar experiences and you made it out, at the end, doing well and just a happier person. So I just loved hearing all those inspirational stories. It just really warmed my heart, and I just want to say I appreciate you. Okay. Remember, if you want to support the podcast, you can go over to nachesnow.com/shop. I've got digital goodies and t-shirts and all the things. And of course, at the bottom right of any page on nachesnow.com, you could buy me a cup of coffee. Anyway, let's get into this episode. And like I said, you are going to love her. Hello, Toni, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nache. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm really excited to talk to you and dig into all the things. I'm glad you were recommended by my people, because when I went to your feed and then your site, and then as I was reading about you, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I need to have her on the show. So I'm really excited to have you on and just kind of get into your brain on how you do all the things.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that we've got some overlap in our audiences. I've really been looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, I'm like a punch needle girl. So first of all, I have way too many Instagram accounts. But one of my Instagram accounts is all like my punch needle stuff. I'm in DC. I took like a yarn dyeing class in Baltimore. So I do have, even though I dabble in a lot of crafts, I do have like some yarn people that follow me over there and like my regular account. So yes, there's a lot of, yeah, crossover.
Awesome. I love it. I love it so much.
So, can you just tell the listeners just a little bit about you before you started TL Yarn Crafts?
Sure. So I'm Toni Lipsey, the designer and educator behind TL Yarn Crafts, and my brand mainly focuses on educating people about crochet and kind of different techniques and skills behind that. And then also I design crochet patterns. So everything from wearables to accessories to home goods. I dabbled in amigurumi for a minute. That didn't pan out, but that was fun. So just exploring just every nook and cranny of crochet. I got into this when I was a little one. I was 13 years old, and my mom taught me how to crochet, picked it back up again in my late 20s. I graduated from college in 2010, right in the middle of the recession, and I just knew with my graduate degree I'd be able to find a job, but I did not. It did not happen, and I spent about 6 to 8 months without a job, and wandered into a craft store because I just needed something to do and stumbled back onto crochet again. And it's just been, I mean, I guess the rest is history after that. Just kind of took it from there. Like eventually I did craft shows and then I did teaching classes, and now I'm kind of squarely in digital classes like YouTube and other recorded classes, and then my designing and selling my patterns.
Nice. Oh my goodness. Okay. So before we get into all that, for
Mm-hmm.
the audience out there, because sometimes people get confused, and sometimes I use this interchangeably when I know that there's a distinct difference.
Uh-huh.
But the difference between crocheting and knitting.
Sure, no problem. I my craft gets confused with knitting all the time, so I'm happy to clear the air. So knitting is with two needles that are straight on the tips, and it creates knitting is kind of interchanging loops, whereas crochet has a hook on the end. You use one crochet hook to crochet, and that is more like a series of knots together. So they create very different fabrics. Crochet is a little bit thicker, a little bit more dense. And I gravitated toward crochet because, in my opinion, I think crochet is underrepresented in the yarn arts. I think crochet had a bad rap for a really long time. It's kind of like your grandma's craft. Old timey stuff had its heyday back in the 70s. And I'm here to just show that crochet is sexy, crochet is fun, crochet is modern, and that's really what I strive for. But they are two very different crafts, and get ready to get your head bitten off if you mix them up.
Right, right. So, you like wander into the craft store.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, okay, I need something, right? And then you stumble upon crocheting. You find that, you love this craft.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, they might wander into a yarn store and then they might do like a project here and there and then they move on to another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why did it stick for you?
Well, interestingly enough, in that period in 2010, when I was kind of looking for something to spend my time on, I actually started off with making jewelry. And I was making bracelets and earrings and all kinds of fun stuff for a little while. And kind of to your point, I played around with that and it just didn't stick. Like the passion wasn't there. It was a fun way to pass the time, but I didn't look forward to making another bracelet. Whereas once I finally picked up crochet and got into the blogs and the books and the magazines and the different designers, and then the social media scene blew up. Like there's just so much to explore in this craft, and there's so many people that are looking at it in a different way. Like you can't exhaust the opportunities to learn and to grow and to practice with crochet. And I think that's what's kind of kept me enamored with this craft for all these years.
When did you realize you could turn it into a business? Did you start out initially just showing your designs on Instagram or blogging about it? How did it evolve over time for you? And, I should have asked you too, I apologize. Around what year was this? Was this literally right after graduation that it started to turn into something? So was it like 2011, 2012? Yeah.
I would say I initially kind of took it from hobby to potential side hustle right around 2013. So it got to a point after I picked up crochet in 2010, I was just making stuff for friends and family, baby blankets, hats, scarves, all that kind of stuff. And after a while, as gracious as they are, my family was like, you know what, I think we're good. We're good. So, more hats, thanks. But I knew that I wanted to keep doing what I was doing. So I needed to find a way to not have like a stash of hats in my house. So that's when I decided to start selling at craft shows. And it wasn't about making money because at that point I had a stable job. My household was fine. I didn't need any extra money. But there's something so exciting and riveting about selling at a craft show. And my very first show was in 2013. And funny enough, I only sold one item, but you couldn't tell me nothing. I'm about to make this thing. It's happening right now. And I got excited because I learned something. I learned what worked. I learned what didn't. I learned like maybe this wasn't the right show. Maybe I'm not using the right colors. Maybe these aren't the right price points. And these are things that I'd never considered at any other point in my life because I'd never sold anything. So I think the learning and kind of activating that part of my brain as this new challenge was really exciting. And then from there, my business has evolved so much and I've explored so many different income streams that running the business itself is its own type of excitement separate from actually just crocheting. So it's fun to see how
Mm.
things have evolved in this craft industry since even just since 2010, since 10 years ago, how many different ways you can engage with an audience and how you can sell them different types of products and how you can work with different companies. Like there's so much to it that considering that one person working out of their guest bedroom can accomplish these things, like it's just really exciting to explore.
Maybe we can talk about some of the ways because on the podcast before, I've really stressed like the importance of diversifying your income, and I've had guests on here too who've talked about like different ways that they do it so you're not beholden to this one source, and if that goes away then your whole business dies.
For
What
sure.
in your line of business, what are some of the different ways that you've diversified your income?
Sure. So with crochet designing, I get yarn and I make a design and ultimately I'm selling the pattern. So I'm selling somebody the experience of making a thing that I've already made and I'm trying to do that
Mm.
over and over and over again. So a few ways that I make income is selling patterns directly. So I have my website where I sell patterns on and there are also several different platforms that you can sell patterns on. So I'll have the same pattern on different platforms because they have different audiences. Also, I'll do things like designing for magazines. So that's completely different. They might have some exclusivity where they are the only ones that can promote that pattern for a certain amount of time, and then you get the rights back and you can sell it. There's also the opportunity to write books. And that's not something that I've had the opportunity to do just yet, but I think it's a really great way to almost create like a collection because with designing right now there's a lot of opportunity to make those kind of one-off patterns, but having a book or even just an ebook is a really fun way to explore a particular technique or a particular crochet style in that kind of collective way. Teaching, I think, naturally evolves out of being a designer because once you
Mhm.
kind of hooked people into, wow, I can really do this, let me build on these skills, it's just a very very easy transition to go from designing to teaching somebody to do how to do something, and then that's got its own own kind of tentacles that grow out of that of ways to make money. So it's just, I don't know, you just follow the streams and the tributaries and see what works. And if something doesn't work, what's nice about especially selling digital product or selling an experience is you don't put a whole lot into it up front. So if you want to experiment with selling patterns on a certain platform, with designing for a certain magazine, if it doesn't work out, you're really not out that much. You're out a bit of time. Maybe you're out a couple dollars for whatever you invested in your materials, but it's not like this devastating amount of money. So it's nice
Mhm.
to experiment pretty safely with it.
I love that selling an experience because what's interesting when you are at the craft shows, you were selling a physical product, which can get tricky too sometimes. I was talking to one guest about it, and it's weird because a lot of time goes into some of these handmade goods, but people aren't necessarily ready to invest the kind of money for
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that was like hand crocheted.
Yeah, the amount of selling you have to do at a show is it's astronomical. One of my fondest memories is I'd be at a show and I'd kind of develop a spiel of how I sell a certain product or a certain series of products, and then I'd look at my booth partner a couple hours later and I was like, I must be driving you crazy because I've said the same thing like 95 times today.
Right.
The culture of craft shows is so fun and so interesting. I'd honestly encourage anybody who sells a physical product to at least do one show because it'll give you a serious appreciation for the work that you do.
I just think, and maybe because I've done some craft shows too,
Mhm.
and I don't know if it's because I'm an extrovert, but I
Mhm.
just love meeting all the people. And it's just something special about when someone chooses to buy an item, right? It's just like, oh my goodness, this is going to be in their home. Like they
Mhm.
really are happy and they're walking away with my product. And then just getting to know people and how they interact with different products too, I feel like is like just like interesting too, because then like, okay, I might need to do more of X, or people like this color more than they like that color. So it's like a
Yeah.
little market research too.
is. Yeah, you really dial into the psychology of selling to people and understanding like just setting up your booth differently can encourage somebody to buy something, having your products in different colors, using different materials. Like it's this unique combination of factors that goes into somebody walking up to your booth and immediately being connected with your product, and that it's really exciting. I'm a child of psychology, I'm a student of psychology, so understanding what makes somebody want something, because if you think about it, at a craft show you've got a few seconds to reel somebody in,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're sitting next to, you've got makers on either side of you. There's potentially hundreds of people in this room milling about. For the really, really good shows, it's super crowded. So sometimes you won't even get everybody there because they can't physically get to you. So you have to make an impression immediately. And the idea of kind of even making adjustments at the show of how you have stuff set up, it's just a really fun experiment, I think.
And then at some point, did you decide to go full time, or do you still do this on the side?
Yeah, I actually went full time in 2017. So by that point, I was like fully entrenched in designing, and the opportunities it was really great because with craft shows and the kind of product that I make, it's seasonal. I can only really sell my stuff from like late October, honestly, through about Christmas. After that, people are like, hey, if I need a scarf, I'll just go to Target. Like, it's not happening anymore. So the fact that I couldn't really express my creative side for the majority of the year got a little bit discouraging. So I was like, I need to find a way to connect with people throughout the year. And that's what designing has been able to do for me. And it's just nice to kind of like, now that I'm full time, I can kind of explore some of those other income streams, some of my other creative interests, kind of take some risks, work with different collaborators. Like, it just opens up a lot of opportunity now that I'm full time.
I have some listeners who are on the fence probably. They have whatever business in whatever industry. They've started making some income. They want to make the jump, but not sure if they should make the jump. They're like right on that edge. And everybody's situation, of course, is a little different. But for you, because it is a scary jump for most, right? Not all. What made you confident enough to be like, okay, I'm going to do it. I know I can do this.
What's interesting is I feel like I'm in my mid-30s. So I kind of grew up in this era of, you're going to go to college, you're going to get a good job, invest in your 401k, then you're going to retire. Like, that's life. That was it.
Right.
And that was the message that I always had. So the idea of going full time in a creative endeavor was never even a consideration. Even once I started picking up my craft and really enjoying it and making some pretty decent money, I never considered it. But it eventually got to a point where TL Yarn Crafts was doing well, and I got this really awesome opportunity from this company. It was going to involve me investing a lot of time and energy. And I'd already, and don't tell my old boss, but I'd already been doing TL Yarn Crafts work at work. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who does it. It's like, once it's ramping up, it's like, I can't only do this on the weekends anymore. I need a little bit more time with it. And it just kind of got to where I was between a rock and a hard place. Like, I could either explore this venture with TL Yarn Crafts, which would force me to go full time, or I could focus on my day job, which I actually really enjoyed. It's not even like I hated my job and I just wanted to do something else. So for anybody who's kind of on the fence trying to make that decision, my main advice is, do whatever you need to do to make that decision easier. So if you need to have conversations with your significant other or your family, do that. If you need to save a certain amount of money, do that. If you need to get a studio space, do that. Like, try to, leading up to that decision, put the pieces in place. So when you finally do decide, yeah, I'm going to take this full time, it doesn't feel like you're jumping off a cliff. Maybe it just feels like you're walking through a door, just make it a little bit easier on yourself. And I'm grateful that I was working in an industry where I told myself, if this really doesn't work out, I'll give it a year. If it doesn't work out, I could find another HR job,
Right.
You're in something a little bit more specialized, as something that will be a little bit more difficult, that decision might be a little bit harder. So You got to do what it takes to make you feel comfortable, because you don't want to get into this dream job feeling guilty.
It's interesting that you were in HR because one of the biggest questions that I've gotten through the years from creatives who are thinking about making the jump is health insurance. Like,
Yeah.
that is like the one thing that totally freaks people out. And they're like, what am I going to do if I don't have a job? Will I be able to afford like private health insurance? It's so expensive. I don't know. Is it going to be as good? And then some people are, you know, of course, depending if, they're married, they could, get on their spouse's insurance, but other people, they might not have that option, which makes it a little bit scarier. For you, was that like something that was scary for you, or were you already covered?
Yeah, I'm really grateful that by the time I decided to quit, I was married to, and my husband works in the corporate world and had insurance for both of us already, because I never worked a job good enough to give me decent insurance. So
Mm.
I had been on his plan for years at this point. So thankfully that wasn't part of my decision, but like health insurance, paying taxes, paying rent on a
Mm-hmm.
studio, like those kinds of expenses, you definitely have to
Mm-hmm.
take into consideration before you make that leap, for sure.
Yes. And then, a lot of times too, what I talk about on the show is just really thinking about the finance part, right? And so
Mhm.
for you, as far as pricing your products and figuring out, okay, if I'm going to do this, how much do I need to make? Like, how did you think through all that and figure it out?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because when you're first starting out, it's like 100% passion, right? You just want to
Mm-hmm.
make your art, and you want everybody to buy it, and it's gonna be great because all the people are buying my stuff. But after a while, it's like, okay, yeah, I do have to pay my bills too, so let's like be smart about this. I think one of the things that I focused on early on, and especially in the early parts of my career, I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, like learning from people who've done this already. So I was like, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
spend the next several years struggling if I can make some smart choices now. So when it came to finances, I definitely, one of the main things I did, and we brought this up earlier, is try to diversify my income streams. So I started a YouTube channel and I monetized it. I started selling on as many digital platforms as possible. I made sure when I did collaborations that I was getting paid, because there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of businesses out there who will collaborate with you for either free product or just exposure. And I'm like, sure, that's cool, but that don't pay the rent, honey. Like, we need to
I
get
need to eat.
yes, I need to eat, and I need to, and at this point, honestly, I'm at a point in life where I want to eat well, so let's
Right.
find a way to make sure we're all happy. So I think kind of diversifying income streams, understanding what your interests are and what you have to offer is important. And then also making sure you get paid properly. So
Mm.
don't enter into a collaboration where they're going to give you $100 and they want $2,000 worth of product from you, or
Mm-hmm.
especially at this point when a lot of people are making money from their influence or being able to sell a product that doesn't belong to them to their audience. If they want your Instagram platform to sell their product, they need to pay for that. If they want you to put things in
Mm-hmm.
your stories, they need to pay for that. If they want to put things in your newsletter, those are those are platforms that you own. That's an audience that you've built, and they need to pay for the luxury of selling their product to your audience. And I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people forget that you spend so much time and energy and money cultivating your audience, that in and of itself is valuable. So just early on, making sure I walked in the room asking for probably more money than I deserved. But you know what? When you walk in a room with your head held high and say, I want $500 for this, they're like, oh, maybe we should give her $500 for this. Like, it happens more often than not. So
Right.
just have that confidence, and believe in yourself, and understand that you are worth something, no matter where you are in this journey. Whatever, if somebody's approaching you to sell something, they clearly understand that you are worth something.
I know some people out there, maybe especially some people at the beginning, they're like, well, do I need a lawyer? Do I need a CPA? How
Mhm.
do I even get started? For you, when you think back to those times, how were you able to figure out what you needed? And did you invest in any of those type of people early on?
Yeah, the main resource I invested in early on was a bookkeeper. I didn't
Mm.
have the opportunity to invest in like a full-on CPA just yet, and I have that person now who I consult with pretty regularly. But early on, I consulted with a bookkeeper because one, I wanted to make sure I was paying my taxes properly because I've heard
Yeah.
horror stories
Oh,
about
yeah.
people who weren't paying their taxes properly, not paying the right amount, not pulling their sales taxes, and then they get this massive tax bill that just is such a hit, and I didn't want that to happen. I was terrified about that, and thankfully I found a bookkeeper that works in a firm, so even if I did have questions that were beyond her, she was still able to take those to some of her colleagues and get me answers. So I was able to find somebody and build a really good relationship with them. So now at this point that I'm working with somebody else within her company, I can still reach out to her and be like, "Hey girl, I got a quick question." So
Right.
that was, and that's really just for peace of mind. Like the last thing you want when you're trying to be creative is worrying about like, oh, did I pay my quarterly sales tax? Like, no, that shouldn't be something you have to worry about. So for me, and just the way that my brain works, I needed to get the finance stuff figured out early on, and I'm really glad that I did that because it's good for peace of mind.
I think another piece of like that people struggle with is the marketing, right? Because you talked about you started your YouTube channel, you started selling these patterns, which people have done, right? But maybe they've only sold one, right?
Right. Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
like, why is no one buying my stuff? Why is
Right.
no one looking at my videos? So for you, what has worked when it comes to really putting yourself out there and getting noticed and building a community?
Yeah, I think I'm grateful that I came up in the early era of social media when it was about connecting with people. It was about personality and it was about
Mm-hmm.
just building this community of like minded people and engaging with them on this really real level. And I
Mm-hmm.
was able to just kind of harness my natural personality to be like, hey, you're not my customers, like you're my friends. You love yarn as much as I do. I made this pattern because it's something that I'd want to wear. And if you want to wear it too, you should make it. And let's be scarf twins, like, just silly stuff like that. So just building that kind of natural friendship with your audience. It's not about selling to a customer. You need to know them on a deeper level. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that's always been a part of my business, and early on when I was giving a lot of like business advice, I would suggest to people, don't feel bad if you come across someone who is not your customer. Not everybody is your customer. You're not selling
Mm-hmm.
to every single one of your neighbors. You're selling to the one, two, three, four neighbors who understand your vision, who appreciate the things that you do, and who value your work. And selling to them properly, engaging them on a regular basis is going to make them tell their friends. They're going to tell their friends. And now you've got this ripple effect of the type of customer that you want because you don't constantly have to prove yourself to them. They've come to expect this great product that they relate to on a regular basis. And that's what I've really tried to create within TL Yarn Crafts is this community of people who are like, we get it. And we're always excited for what you have coming next because my style is not really going to change. So I need people who are willing to rock with me for the long haul because I'm like, look, you know what I do. You know what my style is. And so I don't have the biggest audience, but I do pride myself in having a very engaged and excited audience.
And then for you, between like your newsletter or YouTube or Instagram, where do you feel? I'm always curious from people because everybody's audience is a little bit different. Which of those audiences do you feel has the most engagement and actually will take action if you're like, hey, I've got this new tote PDF pattern out. You should check it out.
Surprisingly, I think my most engaged audience is my newsletter. And that is
Mm-hmm.
actually my smallest audience. But when I send something out to my newsletter, it's like wildfire, like immediately.
Diehards.
I mean, die hard. But I mean, if you think about the idea behind it, somebody who gets on your email list and stays on it, they've invited you into this very personal, intimate space. Like social
Yes.
media is this public space. Anybody can find you, look you up, easy peasy. But a newsletter or an email account is this personal thing that you set up, and you only let people message you who you say, yes, I want to receive stuff from you. So the you know, I think there's maybe like 20,000 people on my newsletter list, and I'm really happy with that number because they do take action. When I put a link in my newsletter, they're clicking on it, they're reading blog posts, they're purchasing patterns, they're participating in crochet alongs. And I think part of the reason why that works is because I don't bombard them with content. Like when I put something up on YouTube, if you're subscribed to me and turned on alerts, you're going to get an alert once a week, and that gets lost everybody else that you're subscribed to. But for my newsletter, I might send one out. I'm really bad about it. I might send one out every like 3, 4, 5 weeks with just like a collection of links of everything that's been going on. But I think since maybe I am so judicious in what I send to my newsletter, it's only the good stuff. It's the best of the best stuff. So yeah, I would definitely say my newsletter list is the most engaged, and yeah, those are like the die-hard fans for sure.
People out there, if you are not collecting emails, start today.
Even if you're not sending out a newsletter yet, just collect the emails. So once you do have something to say, you have somebody to say it to.
Yeah, and I always like tell people too, because it's interesting. For me, I only want to email people when I have something to say. So during the podcast season, they're getting something usually a lot more often, but off season, maybe once a month ish. But I do have things set up. Like if someone subscribes to me for the first time, I batch created 10 emails. So at least those people, when they first start, are getting 10 to 15, depending on which newsletter they signed up for, emails straight. So I can kind of hook them initially. And then after that, it's probably less frequently. But if they're still on the email list, that means they're a fan.
For sure. I love that idea of having kind of like this digital orientation to your brand, right? Like somebody signs up and, maybe they're really excited in the beginning. And if you don't have that kind of setup already, then they don't hear from you for months and months. And then you drop into their email and they're like, wait, did I really let this person email me? I don't even know who this is. Like I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. But I think that's such a smart idea because it's automated, right? Like you don't even have to lift a finger, but you're serving your audience all the same.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to ask you about the pandemic. The past 5 or 6 months has been, I feel like, a shock to not only the US, the world. I think people are still in shock that we're wearing masks, and so much has gone on even throughout COVID. And just question for you and your business, especially since it is a digital product and people were at home, right? There was a period of time when literally no one was leaving the house. Did you find that there was an uptick in people wanting to learn how to crochet?
Yeah, that's one thing that if there's a silver lining in all of this, I'm so grateful that people took this time to invest in their own creativity. And my audience, thankfully, really skyrocketed during quarantine. And I think it's because part of my model is attracting people who are early in their craft, who are maybe picking up crochet for the first time, trying out a new technique, learning things, independently. They're not necessarily going to classes. They just want a quick YouTube video or a blog post to learn how to do this thing or to make this pattern. So since I had already built up this infrastructure that was appealing to beginners, it made sense for people who were just starting out because of COVID, because they had all this free time, to just really dive into my content. I mean, I'd had years of content, of course, by the time March rolled around and everybody was home. So it was literally just blog post after blog post, video after video of just learning and having a lot of fun with it. So I'm really grateful for kind of that uptick in activity on my platform when COVID started.
It's interesting too, because And I'm catching you cold with this question, so you can let me know if you
Oh,
feel comfortable answering it or not. But with the
okay.
whole social justice movement, I feel like there was kind of an influx of people wanting to support Black businesses, which were amazing. But
Yes.
there was like a lot of conversation around the smart way to do it and the not so smart way.
Yeah.
It was like a weird time. And so for
Yeah.
you, I just don't know if you have any kind of comments or suggestions for people out there who are looking to figure out how to support more Black businesses like yours, but do it in a way that feels not awkward or weird.
Yeah. I think everybody's heart was in the right place when all this was going down in June, and with all the protesting, there was a lot happening, and it was really heavy. And as a brand that thrives off of positivity and light and happiness, it was my opportunity to show that there's a full on flesh and blood person behind this, who has lived as a Black woman her entire life. And even though I'm generally pretty positive, I'm not blind. Like, I know what's going on out here. So it was
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity for me to have a different voice in my business. And like you said, there were a lot of businesses whose, again, heart's in the right place, but they were just reaching out. And they're like, hey, can we put you on this list? Can we interview you for this thing? Can we feature you here? And I'm like, okay, like, we don't even know each other, man. Like, how'd you even find me? Like, this doesn't feel real, because if this wasn't going down, you wouldn't have bothered. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a little tricky to navigate, I'm sure, on their part, but also for every Black maker who received this influx of audience members and requests early on. It was really tricky to navigate. So I
Mm-hmm.
think anybody who's looking to engage and promote and elevate Black makers and Black voices, do it in a way that is not you ticking off a box. If you're going
Mm-hmm.
to say, I want to make my brand or my message more diverse, that needs to permeate everything that you do. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're doing for the next few weeks, or we're going to do this feature, or we're going to make this roundup of Black makers, and then we're just going to get back to, business as normal. This is a full
Mm-hmm.
on brand shift, because that is now you taking a stance and saying diversity is important to us, and here's how we're elevating makers now, and this is what we're going to do in the future. And if you're not prepared to do that, tread lightly with any kind of, performative allyship that you have planned, because you can clock it pretty easy. It's so just be careful. Be very, very careful.
I think that captures it perfectly, because I've seen a lot of minority brands out here and some that have kind of said the same thing you've said. It's welcome, but it's a way to do it, and there's a balance, and it should be genuine. And if you're asking
Yes.
me to be on your platform, it should fit and it should make sense, right? So I think that was like beautifully said. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we wrap up here, this is gonna be like a not a weird question, but a little different than what we've talked about. But for your YouTube, I
Yeah.
think I've read several articles that I forgot what the percentage is, but 80% of whatever content is going to be consumed in the year, whatever, via
Mm-hmm.
video. So if you're
Yeah.
not doing video, you are going to get like passed up.
Yeah. You're gonna get left
And
behind real quick.
and
Yeah.
so, for you, any tips for people out there looking to add video to their brand via a YouTube, channel, or just start doing videos on TikTok or
Mhm.
Instagram or what have you?
I think the really interesting shift that we're going through in social media, where just about every platform is starting to prioritize video. Like, Instagram's got Reels and IGTV. You can do videos on Pinterest now. TikTok is massive. YouTube is and has been huge for a really long time. So what's nice about it is that you have the opportunity to create the kind of video content that makes sense for you. Maybe it makes sense for you to be on YouTube, but not on TikTok. Maybe it makes sense for you
Mm-hmm.
to do IGTV, but not Reels. It's so you can kind of experiment in that way. I have found that I am not successful in kind of that short form, impactful 15 seconds, like gotcha video. I don't do well there. That doesn't work for me. Because I think I'm not gonna say I've aged out of it, but I think for what for the message that I have, I don't think I can say what I need to say in 15 seconds. I just can't do it. So, YouTube works for me because I focus on education. And when you're trying to teach somebody a craft that they're making by hand, you need a little bit more time and you need to walk people through it because they're going to have questions. And I've primed my audience to be inquisitive and to practice and to reach out to me if they have questions. Whereas with something like TikTok or Reels, those are a lot more for entertainment. Or if you make a video with you handcrafting something, maybe you just put soothing music behind it and it's fun for that 15 seconds. But I don't find within my brand that it has the impact that a long form video on YouTube does. So find what works for you and then just do it really well. Do it as best as you can. Get good as like within your budget, within your capacity, get a good camera, get some lights, find a good clear space, make it look as professional as you have the capacity to do. So then you can start looking like an expert in your field. So when you continue to make videos, people will come back because they've now been conditioned to expect quality from you. And I think that's what's given me some longevity on a platform like YouTube, because I am nowhere near the only person talking about what I talk about. You have to find a way to stand out.
Before I get to the wrap up question, any advice you have for people? We've touched a little bit on like the social justice movement, on the impacts of COVID-19. And then you have people who may be in jobs that they don't like and have like this creative passion that they're looking to do. I mean, it's just like, I feel like 2020 is a really heavy time for a lot of people. So any words of wisdom for those people out there who have this thing, they know it should be something, but they are just dealing with all the things?
Yeah, a lot of figuring this out is it's all trial and error. And even now that I've been, doing TL Yarn Crafts for 7 years, full time for 3 years, I'm still figuring it out day by day. I'm still working through, well, this worked last week, so we're going to do more of this. I tried this last month, didn't work out, so we're going to do less of this. Like it's always being flexible, understanding that the sands underneath us are shifting on a pretty consistent basis. Like algorithms change, the state of politics changes, and no matter what anybody says, you cannot separate craft and politics. It just is what it is. So we have to stay flexible, and I think with it all, what has to stay consistent is the quality and the personality behind whatever it is that you're doing, because that's what people are attracted to. They want to know what is and isn't working. They want to see you without your makeup on. They want to know, what your favorite coffee drink is. Like, they want to know the person. They're not just there for the product. And that's what gives you that longevity. So even with all the uncertainty of 2020, I think if anything, there's a lot of opportunity for us to decide what our passion is and just explore that to the fullest and make sure we don't lose our own personality, because that's what people are really going to cling to. And I think people need that right now. Like, they need a light at the end of the tunnel. They need a silver lining. They need just a little bit of positivity and some encouragement. And I think there's, especially in craft, when, whether it's beading or macrame or crocheting or whatever, that thing that you finish with once you've done all the work and you've bought all the materials, you've weaved in all the ends, like, and you look at this thing that you've accomplished, that feeling, I think people need more of right now. And we as creatives have the ability to make that resource available. And there's nothing but opportunity for us right now.
I feel like it's showing up, right? It's like showing up as your true authentic self, which I feel like people hear, but it's like, really, no, people, just showing up is kind of like half the battle. And then balancing that with giving yourself some grace too. If you're doing homeschooling and doing, I know somebody who's doing homeschooling while going back to school, while working, it's okay to give yourself like a little bit of a break too. And it's tricky, but it's like finding that balance and figuring out what makes sense for you.
Definitely. I think especially with so much going on right now, people are a lot more understanding if the pace of your business changes. Like, before COVID, I was probably putting out like 4 or 5 patterns a month. I was doing IG lives every week. I was doing crochet
Mm.
alongs quarterly. Like, I mean, I was running myself into the ground, and COVID happened, and I was like, you know what? All of a sudden, I feel like I need a lot of self-care. So y'all don't like 3 patterns a month. I might do 1 crochet along this year. I'm not doing IG live no more. But what I do give you is going to be quality, and
Right.
everybody's going to be fine with that. And that's what happened for 2020. And I give just so much thanks to my audience for extending that grace that I wasn't even extending to myself. After a while, I was like, look, I need to step back, and I really hope you guys will stick it out with me. And they're like, girl, we going through it too. We fine.
Right.
Like, we're all going through it. So, and I think because we show up authentically, when we say, hey, I need a break, stuff's going on, people are like, you know what, I got you, because they know you, and they know
Right.
you well enough to not have these unrealistic expectations. So when you show people that you are just a person, that you're a one-woman show, like, they're a lot more understanding. And I think that's why it's so important to show up authentically, because our lives change, and we can't just be a machine for our audience. We're just people.
Yes. Okay, so a couple wrap up questions. First one is, how do you stay organized? Any tools, software, and techniques that you would like to share?
Sure. So one of the best ways I stay organized is keeping all of my stuff in one place. So I work out of my home, and it's very, very easy, especially as a crocheter, to have a project bag in the living room, and one in the basement, and one in my bedroom. And like, it's really easy to just spread out because you just have a lot of stuff. But I think one of the things that helps is just keeping everything in my studio. So even if I work on a project in the living room during the day, I take it back up to my studio at the end of the day, because that's where work stuff belongs. And having those really healthy boundaries between my life and my work life, super important. Another kind of tool, and I don't know if you can really call it a tool, but I'm very much an analog person. Like, I am a pen and paper, like paper planner, to-do list. Like, I need to write things down. And one of the things that I came to understand about writing things down is it really does help you remember them. And so I'm definitely somebody who likes notebooks. I like good pens, and I like to write things down, and that's kind of how I stay organized, kind of those two main things.
And then it's always tricky asking crafters this because I never know what I'm going to get. Do you have a hobby?
Well, interestingly enough, now that crochet for the most part is what I do professionally, I have found it really important for me to find little things outside of crochet just for myself. So one of the things I do is I journal on a regular basis. So my husband and I have a time set aside in the evenings, and we sit at our dining room table, and we set a timer for 30 minutes, and we just write. And we don't discuss it with each other. We don't share the journals with each other, but it's our opportunity to kind of decompress from the day, write our thoughts out, and then we close the notebook, and we move on with the day. And we do that every day. And it's just this really nice kind of palate cleanser, because you can feel your shoulders loosening up, and you can feel your head clearing a little bit, because you just get all the stuff that's inside, you get it out. So journaling, I do consider it kind of a hobby. It's something that I've invested time into. I get like the really cute notebooks and the good pens and stuff. So I do consider it a hobby, and it's just something that's been really therapeutic. And honestly, it's good for my marriage, because we're both just a little less stressed.
Right. Okay, that just like warms my heart. Like, everybody out here, anybody who follows me knows that I'm like a big time bullet journaler, and I probably have over 100 pens, and it's a problem. I have stickers. I even have a silhouette where I make my own stickers. I mean, it's a problem. So I am all for it.
I love it. I love it though. I have been getting a lot into stickers. I used to send, I had a period of time when I would send a lot of letters, and that was one of my hobbies, where I like had pen pals. I would send letters to my best friend and my mom, and send a lot of cards. So I got really into stickers, and I've kind of fallen back on that, but the sticker collection is like out of control. It's crazy.
Right. And please just tell the listeners like where they can find you.
Sure. So you can find me at TL Yarn Crafts on pretty much every platform. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest. I spend a lot of time on Instagram, but I'm kind of transitioning off of that because the algorithm just changed, and it just kicked me right in the butt. I'm like, you know what? maybe I'm not supposed to be here this often, but definitely YouTube. And then I have a Facebook group called TLYC
Mm.
Makers, and we focus a lot on yarn crafts. But as a Black woman and dealing with social unrest right now and just all the craziness happening with politics, I also invite people to have those trickier conversations in that safe
Mm.
space. So people can find my Facebook group TLYC Makers as well.
I love it. Thank you so much. You've shared so much goodness. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really, really fun. I was so looking forward to this.
Well, my friends, if you are listening to my voice, that means you really enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I thought Toni gave some great advice. It is clear how and why she was able to create such an amazing business. She really values her community. She really has passion for what she does, and she's very thoughtful and calculated in a great way on how she runs her business. So I hope you found this episode to be inspirational, and I hope that you took notes and that you're going to do all the things from diversifying the way you're bringing in your income all the way to making sure that you're collecting email addresses. So, yes, my friends, take note, take action. All right, you guys. Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube. Please give me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a review. And as always, please head on over to my shop, nachesnow.com, and there you can get some of my digital journals and also some of my t-shirts. All right, take care. Until next week.